The thing I learned about politics is, first of all, it doesn't require a license or a degree, and that's why I could get into the game. But that means it attracts a lot of people who are not necessarily qualified. But if you're willing to work hard, willing to work overtime, show a lot of passion, you have a relative degree of smarts, you can move up the ranks of politics pretty quickly. I ran away from home in high school and I hitchhiked to Nashville because I thought I was a songwriter. It turns out I really wasn't a very good songwriter, and that's how I got into politics. What attracted me to candidates changed over the years. At first, I kind of had a litmus test. It was like, I want to line up with this candidate, 8 out of 10 issues that are important to me or something like that. And then I realized sometimes that I could line up perfectly with a candidate and they turned out to be like incredibly ethically challenged or something like that, not a good human being. Over time, I began to realize that what was more important to me, and I think should be for a lot of people, is the character of the candidates. What kind of life have they lived? What do they value? Who do they care about? Great campaigns tell a story. When I'd sit down with a candidate, I'd go through an exercise to say, you need to tell a story. And they'd say, well, how do you do that? And we say, you establish a threat or an opportunity. That's why you're running, to make things better or less worse. You identify the victim of the denied opportunity or the imposed threat. Identify the villain imposing the threat or denying the opportunity. Donald Trump said, make America great again. That's the opportunity. What's the threat? Others, outsiders, making our lives more dangerous and losing our paychecks and way of life. Who are the victims? Middle-class America, whose quality of life is changing and losing their jobs. Who are the villains? Mexican immigrants, Chinese, the media elites in Washington. What's the solution? Tear up the trade deal, build a wall, drain the swamp. Who's the hero? Donald Trump. What was Hillary Clinton's story? Not a clue. People want meaning in their lives. I mean, it's not enough to just be the smartest candidate. You have to understand that voters want you to provide meaning and context. I liked working with people like George W. Bush because he was somebody, whether you agreed with him or not, he had strong convictions. He knew exactly what he believed. He knew exactly what he wanted to do. He had a really clear vision. And when we'd have discussions about the campaign, he would say, okay, MCAT, here's the deal. Here's what I believe. Here's what I want to say. Here's what I'm going to do. Now, you're the communicator. You figure out how we're going to say it. Compassionate conservatism is what drew me to him politically. In Texas for a long time, it was a two-party state, but you were either a progressive Democrat or a conservative Democrat. There was no Republican Party, really until George W. Bush came to town. And he had this message about compassionate conservatism, which is something that appealed to a lot of people like me. And so when he came to town and said that, I'd raised my hand and said, that's what I am. It had a lot of appeal for independents and conservative Democrats like me, and a lot of us crossed the bridge at that time to support him. I think there's a sort of mythology about George W. Bush that he's not that smart, and that he had to have smart people around him. He's one of the most street smart people I've ever met in my life. But beyond that, he was very deliberative. The thing that was appealing to me and a lot of other people about George W. Bush is he's just very authentic. He's just the kind of guy you want to hang out with and drink beers with. And so when I first worked with him, I realized that was what was attractive about him. So when I did commercials with him, I almost never did a scripted commercial because it looked like he was reading a script and he wasn't very good at it. And so when we did the convention film, which is a standard thing you do for your nominee at the convention that introduces him, and it's an important moment because a lot of the country hasn't seen him or her yet. And so I made this biofilm. And so I was making this biofilm, and I went to Crawford, Texas, and shot it. And we did a scene with George and Laura Bush, and I asked him about the birth of their daughters, and he responded and just completely mangled what he was trying to say. And we all laughed. It was really funny. And then we backed up, and I said, okay, take 2 and take 3. I got it perfect. And then a couple weeks later, I went to edit the film, and we got to that part, and we all laughed in the edit room and said, okay, get it out, put in the good cut. And then 5 minutes later, I said, wait, back up, put in the bad cut. And everybody looked at me like, what? And I went to the campaign, and they said, you are out of your mind. You're intentionally putting in a mistake? And they said, why? And I said, because it's authentic, it's real, it's funny, it's human. People can relate to it. And by the way, let's just acknowledge the obvious and lower the bar of expectations for our guy because he's not that good. He's not a great speech giver or orator. Donald Trump is authentic in a completely different way. Here's how. So when he went to give his announcement speech, which is the most important day on any campaign because you kind of get a free shot by the press. You can say whatever you want. You get to provide your rationale and your storyline, your narrative, whatever it is. So imagine our reaction when he came down that escalator at Trump Tower, went up on the stage to give his announcement speech, and literally made it up on the spot. Just, the rapist coming across the border, I'm going to build a website, I'm really rich. It was just seat of the pants, the whole thing. And that's exactly what his supporters wanted. They wanted to see something completely different. They wanted to see something that wasn't political. So for Trump supporters, not having a prepared speech is exactly what they wanted, because they'd seen prepared speeches all their lives and put people in Washington that they didn't like and didn't feel like they delivered. Chaos works for Donald Trump. I mean, that's part of his message. That's part of his brand. Political campaigns, particularly for president, really boil down to hope versus fear or change versus more of the same. And, you know, Barack Obama is a great example of a hope presidency. George Bush was hope in 2000 and fear in 2004. Donald Trump excelled in fear. And Donald Trump was the first candidate that I can remember that was able to run a campaign largely based on fear and going backwards.